Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Coaching from the Heart with your co hosts, myself, Tyler Thurman, and my good friend and coaching colleague and co host, Harold Feddersen.
Good afternoon, Tyler.
Harold, thanks again for joining me. And we're going to have a stimulating conversation on the topic of trust today. But before we get started on that, I want to just point people in the direction of how they can find us. So if you're interested in this conversation, if it piques your interest, if you get value out of it, and you want to work with this in a deeper capacity, you can find myself, Tyler Thurman, at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com, and can find all my contact information there. And Harold, how can folks find you?
Folks can find me on Facebook. My Facebook page is The Awakening Heart, or my blog, which is WordPress dot hearttohand.com, I think.
Thank you.
I think I might have had that wrong, actually. It might be hearttohand.wordpress.com.
One of these days, it's just gonna come out so smooth. It's
One,
not even gonna be
one of these
funny.
days, I'm going to have it clear.
Okay, so now that you know how to find us, the topic of the day is trust. So you and I both really wanted to have this conversation, just because it's a really interesting one, and I think it's probably most often thought of in terms of relationships, right? Because we think about trust most often, I think, in terms of I'm trusting another person. Um, and we say all sorts of things to do with trust, but I think largely we don't fully understand what we're saying, and what trust really means. And I think it's going to be really helpful for folks as we kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. But just to get us started off, um, and moving into direction, you know, trust, so we are in relationship with people, right? And we we develop this thing called trust. Um, so we it's like this rapport with people, right? Where I like you, you like me, and then we get to thinking that, oh, I trust this person. That's kind of a way that we frequently talk about it in our culture. Uh, we say, I trust you. Uh, and usually we just stop there, right? I trust you. I trust you. But my experience of trust is it's not that helpful of a thing when it's left to the imagination like that. When it's so general that you just say, I trust a person. Because, and we're going to dissect this more as the show goes on, but what are what are we trusting in them to do, right? Is it an action? Is it a way of, I trust you to be a certain way, I trust you to behave in certain ways. um, it's really interesting because oftentimes when you talk to people about it, they don't really know, right? And this actually kind of harkens back to one of our previous shows, the conversation about agreements and expectations, because we come up with all this stuff in our head, right, about how we think other people are supposed to behave. um, and then in the conversation in the context of trust, we do that, and then it's almost another word for expectation on some level, right? It's I'm trusting or expecting you to behave in certain ways. And then, of course, the unspoken last part of that is so that I get to be okay, Right? So it kind of comes back to us. So we talk about betrayal of trust, right? Where if you've done something that violates what I trust or what I expect, you know, then in some way I don't get to be okay. And it's really interesting conversation. So I'm going to toss it over to you, Harold, and just you can take
Yeah,
that
I
as
think
it is.
that's the that is probably the most common way that we interact with trust is I trust you as long as you do what I say, which you just said makes it more of an agreement than a trust thing. But what's interesting about that is all of the power in that relationship then is in the other.
Mm,
So if my well-being or my happiness is based on your actions, then I'm in trouble because I actually don't have any power in that relationship. I'm sort of at the helm of your whims, so to speak.
right. Absolutely.
So it's a dangerous place to enter into.
Yeah, it's kind
Not
of
dangerous might not be the right word, but
it's a dangerous game.
danger. There's a sign. I
It's
saw
kind of
Wile E. Coyote.
oh yes. Oh, that harkens me back to my youth. But anywho, so that kind of takes me back to the crux of a conversation that I often have with just about everybody I come into contact with that I get to talk with for more than 10 minutes is what I call the inside out conversation, or the inside out versus outside in, right? Which is um, really just a way of talking about how the human experience comes together. And we think it comes together, it comes at us, right? The world is the cause, and my experience is the effect. Um, so I'm feeling miserable. I'm feeling, in this case, betrayed, right? So if my trust has been violated in some way, then I get to feel this beautiful thing called betrayal, right? Uh, and so it looks like it's happening to me, but when in reality, and you were just speaking to this, Harold, um, what's going on is we've we've given our well-being, we've put it in your hands, right? We said, okay, I have this amazing capacity for inner peace and happiness and well-being and love that's always there. But you know what? I want you to control that.
You take that. You
you
take the wheel of
take,
that.
yeah, you take the wheel. I don't want to be responsible for this thing that
This is the best.
apparently is just it's too good to be true, right? So of course we're not actually doing that. It's this is a very kind of unconscious process, but in essence that's what we're doing. We have this thing called innate well-being or innate mental health or the peace and love of God, if you want to go in that direction. Um, and it's always available to us. We might not always be aware of it, but it's always available to us. But then we misunderstand how our experience of life comes together and gets created. And so we think, because the way our body is set up and the way that our senses are set up, it looks like it's outside in, as opposed to the other way around. This is kind of the big illusion in the world, as far as I'm concerned. As far as it actually works 180 degrees backwards. Our experience comes from within. It comes from our own thinking. It comes from um, our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, our memories, our past thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future. Those are all made of thought. right? They're all made of mental energy, whatever you want to call it. And trust is one of those things that gets created from the inside out, and then we project it out, right? That's the out. Um, and so it seems like it's this commodity, this thing that you're are almost physically building together with two people, right? That we even talk about it in that way, right? I'm building trust. You've got to earn your trust, kind of like you earn money, right?
We talk about it like money a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a commodity, right? That exists
Yeah.
outside the mind. And so as long as we treat it that way, in, in a place where it doesn't actually exist, we're gonna have problems with it, right? It's gonna uh, uh, it's gonna mess us up. But we're not gonna know that because nobody's, the world will largely agree with the lie or the misunderstanding of an outside in universe, right? Um, so that's kind of that's the crux of the trust conversation. Is it starts, in order to be able to understand trust better, we first have to understand it's just one more thing that we create in the mind and then project out and forget that it's in the mind and we think it's out there somewhere.
So yeah, so if we treat it like a commodity, because you do hear that a lot, um, you're earning you're earning trust. So then the other person has built up enough equity that
Yeah.
we can trust them. Um, but the whole thing's a bit of a schlemazel, because really it's just a sneaky way around being authentic with your communication. So instead of saying, I want this agreement in place between us, we have this fancy, you're earning trust, and then eventually you'll build up enough that at some magic point, you're going to be trusted. Um, unless, of course, you spend some of that trust somehow, or that trust collapses. Instead of just having, from the get go, just having a clear and authentic communication about what kind of agreements you want to have.
Yeah.
Because I think you and I probably, the place that trust shows up the most is infidelity.
Mm.
I think that's probably the one area where the conversation of trust always happens.
It does tend to end up back there again
Yeah.
and again. Yeah. Which is that's just one form
Hmm.
of this symptom of misunderstanding trust, right? But
Hmm.
that's one of the best ones to um, either get lost in or really uh, transform your experience of relationships, is looking there, right? Because
Yeah.
it's going to be the hardest place to see the deeper truth here.
Because it's the place where we most easily get comfortable in our victim suit, which is, if you are if you're interacting with another person from the type of trust that we're talking about, which is where the other person has your trust, then that is, you're the victim and they're the powerful one in the relationship. So that's where that dynamic shows up all the time, and you get to be the victim, which all of us are victim in some way in our lives still, no matter
Right.
how you know awake we are. It still shows up.
We're going to gravitate towards that because that's what the ego mind craves, right?
Absolutely.
Is victim, and its favorite uh, lunchtime snack is is, is righteous indignation, right?
Mm,
Oh,
get,
it goes down smooth.
Give me some crackers and righteous indignation.
That's right. Spread it on thick.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so get basically what happens, right, is um I mean, it can take any number of forms, like we just said, but there's um an expectation in our minds, and it, by the way, you might have actually had this conversation with them too. It doesn't have to be that there's never been an agreement in place, but so we build up these expectations, and then we either speak them aloud or we don't. But in the case of infidelity, let's give the simplest one, right? Because it can be all across the board as far as where people cross the line of trust, and we can talk about that more in a minute. But so we get the expectation, we say, okay, um, basically to ourselves, right? If you do this, I will no longer trust you. That's kind of that's a basic form of it. Um, and what happens is the other person does the thing, right? So in this case, has sex with another person, right? While under a marriage contract, or you could just be boyfriend girlfriend, or boyfriend boyfriend girlfriend girlfriend. And what we don't realize is this is all to do with our own well-being, our own innate mental health, our own peace of mind. That, in the beginning of the show, we talked about, I've given that away. So in essence, when we're saying we trust somebody, and in this case, when we're saying, I trust you not to have sex with this other person, what we're saying is, if you do, not only can't I, quote unquote, trust you, but I can't be okay. I'm not okay with that means I won't be okay. So, okay with that, you can just stop with okay, right? I won't be okay. I'm not okay if you do that. And that, on the most fundamental level, the level of spirit, right? That's not true. It might feel true in the moment, and that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But it's important to to look back towards the source of it all, which is I've I've attempted to give my well-being away. Now I haven't actually, but I functionally have, right? And it it doesn't mean that you have to condone their behavior or say, oh, that's totally fine, it's no big deal. um, but what it does mean on just a descriptive level is I have said I have effectively limited my capacity for peace by saying I've made it conditional, right? So my trust in you is conditional. Let's be fair. It's always conditional. I mean, trust would be irrelevant if unconditional love was abound here. Uh, but
But at
yeah.
the same time, so I like how well, there's a couple things. Um, well, there's a lot. This is a big conversation, but um, I like how you're pointing to the fundamental nature or truth of what you are is undamaged in some way by another person's actions.
Hmm. Well, very well said. You said that better
Okay,
than I
thank you.
will. Yeah. Okay, go.
Um,
Go ahead.
but if there is an agreement in place, because we talked about this during the agreement conversation, or maybe we didn't, that a lot of relationships are based on just an unspoken understanding
Right.
that that you don't go out and in this case have sex with other people. However, that does it should be an agreement. It should be part of the agreement in the relationship if that's what both people want. But what
Right.
I hear you say,
And by the way, I was just going to put in real quick. It could be I'm not going to do business with other people. I'm not going to, it could be another context. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it could be, as a part of an agreement of friendship, you know,
Absolutely.
that you talk to me first before talking to other, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be friends with this other person. No, I'm just kidding. It could be that.
So there's once the agreement has been made, um, it what I hear you saying is in no way does it diminish the pain that this agreement has been broken, right?
Mm,
There is the there is the pain in that if two people make an agreement and then one person doesn't keep the agreement, there is the sort of human the pain of it. Um, However, if it's as an agreement, then you get to decide where to go from there as well. So you can choose to stay in the relationship or leave the relationship. Um, whatever's going to serve you best.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I believe we did talk about this, but it's an opportunity for us to go deeper with it, right? In the agreement expectation conversation. It allows us, so basically our relationships are based on agreement. Like largely, if we can't consistently keep our word, it's it's difficult to be in a relationship in any shape or form, really.
Hmm.
Right? Um, and it's just coming to mind right now. Actually, that could be a reason why we don't want to have the conversation,
Yeah,
because we on some level we know if we have it and they break it,
we have to hold ourselves accountable
then
to the
we
agreement we
have
want.
like very clear confirmation that I can't continue on. But like this,
Hmm.
at the very least, right? Um, Now, if you looked at that more closely, you'd see that's not a problem. That's a really beautiful thing. um, but there does tend to be that sense of betrayal, right? I
Hmm.
don't, however, necessarily think that that's natural. And what I mean by that is I don't think that is a one-to-one causal relationship, right? I think it's built in. It's built in for pretty much everybody. But it wasn't built by God, for for lack of a better term. You know, the because here's the thing, and this is totally impractical, right? So just bear with me for a second. So maybe for some people it's practical, most people not so much. So if we were totally 100% in touch with that innate peace and love that is our fundamental makeup, right? We talked about that last week. Somebody breaking an agreement, which is really just to say they said they would do this and they didn't, or they did something else, right? Um, but if you know with 100% certainty this doesn't affect that, this agreement that has been violated or breached, or however you want to talk about it, has zero to do with this well-being, peace of mind, love of God thing over here. Um, I don't think betrayal has to go with it. A sense of betrayal, a feeling of betrayal, like, oh, you've hurt me. Because that's when I think betrayal, I think, oh, you've emotionally stabbed me in the heart,
Mm.
right? And you've hurt me. You've done the unthinkable. You've done, in some sense, the unforgivable, right? That's another way we think about betrayal. Um, Now you might be thinking of it differently, so I'd love to hear.
Well, when you when you put it that way, it makes me realize that the word betrayal, in the way that we're using it, is a victim word.
Absolutely.
You have betrayed me.
You
Yeah,
did this to me. You victimized me.
yeah. And the way I'm looking at it is, we had an agreement. You broke the agreement, and I'm heartbroken. Not from a place of victimhood, but from the place of my heart is broken because of the loss of what we had in our agreement.
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying there? Like the
Which
heart.
was which was what, by the way?
Oh, sorry, say that. What do you mean there?
So what you said of what we had in the agreement, which
Oh, so whatever the agreement was, it could be business, could be the, um, it could be any agreement in any kind of relationship. If the agreement is in place and the other person breaks it, uh, it's natural and very human to have the heartbreak that goes with it. But not the heartbreak from, like, I'm a victim and you did this to me, just the heartbreak in that actually something sacred that we've agreed to is
mm,
lost.
right.
Um,
So I'm curious. This is great, right? Because this is where Harold and I we differ sometimes. Um, and oftentimes it's just linguistic issues, right? Because we and that's the beauty of human relationship, right? Is we think with words a lot of times, and you say one thing like betrayal, and I say, oh, betrayal. I know that word. And or things like heartbroken, right? Which is what I'm going to ask you about next.
mhm.
Um, and we mean very different things because I mean we think just every once in a while things get lost in translation, right? They get lost in translation every sentence of every conversation,
Mhm.
and
Almost
we
every
don't.
week, you and I actually we're using the same words, but we might mean something there slightly different.
Which is so beautiful about these conversations because we get to kind
Hmm.
of clarify it, real time.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm curious about about when you look at it, because I get what you're saying on a practical level, of course. Like, and
Hmm.
I would never make anybody wrong for feeling betrayal, whatever that feeling is. It's an upset. It's a. I think that in a lot of senses, what you're talking about is grieving. Um,
Yeah, the grieving. Yeah, that'd be a good word for it. Grieving
yeah.
the loss. So if you and I had an agreement of some sorts, let's say that we wouldn't talk about each other behind each other's back, and then you find out I've been talking to Johnny about you.
A
Um,
lot of dirt.
yeah, this is actually, it's a little bit too shallow, um,
No, this is relevant for people.
but if one of us broke that agreement, there is that, because we had an agreement. If you if you're honest, if truth is important to you, um, and two people have arrived at an agreement, then when one person breaks the agreement, there is a grieving because there was a sacred sort of bond that was brought into the spoken word.
Mm.
Um, and in that sense, if that agreement is broken, then there is there's loss. That sacred thing has been broken, and then the grieving would be a natural human consequence to that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, for
Is that
sure.
what you
So
mean?
yeah, and so the only part that for me looks different is nothing meaningful can be lost. So this goes back to that conversation about the essence of who we are. Because to me, when I look at more and more, when I look at my relationships, and I say, oh, I love that person so much. More and more, I'm realizing that love, that thing. So whatever it is that you're talking about, this sacred thing between us. To me, it doesn't actually look like it's between us. It's actually in both of us all the time. And so I get we can kind of sever the physical manifestation of that, but we can't harm the heart of it. So the form of the relationship can change, right? So, you can part ways, you can see each other, spend less time together. But the love and the beauty that you experience, that I experience in those relationships, that's in my experience, it's of a divine nature, which to me looks like it supersedes an agreement being met or not met.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's at our most fundamental sort of place, the essence of our being is not damaged or injured in some way. But I don't know if you've ever heard the 1 + 1 = 3. I think I could be wrong, but I think I remember it from Taoism or
Yeah,
Zen.
I've heard that in the slightly different 2 + 2 = 5.
Okay, it was you that we had. Okay, because I wasn't sure if you and I had this conversation or if I had it with someone else.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so when two people come together in whatever form their relationship is, business, personal, friend, romantic, whatever, when the two people create an agreement together, that's the 1 + 1 = 3. That's the 3. So if the agreement is broken, there actually is something lost. There is the something that was created when those two beings came together under that umbrella. So I actually see it that there actually is something lost,
Mm.
in the world. So if
Oh yeah, in the world for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I was talking otherworldly. Here's the other thing: is it looks to me like most agreements are actually made from a place of misunderstanding our own source,
Yeah,
or
most agreements.
at least trust, right? In the trust conversation, I need to trust you so that I can be okay, right?
Yeah, most agreements are made
So
based on
yeah,
the.
if there was this beautiful pure agreement made, the kind that you're talking about, damn, I would be upset about that going away.
Right. Yeah, actually, there's a thing that we didn't even I didn't even realize was there. Yeah, most agreements are made from the. Well, most agreements. When we're living, most agreements. I was going to say most agreements are made from our
They're
egos.
from the ego, which is what
Yeah,
I'm pointing towards as nothing really has been lost there. It's been uncovered.
yeah.
The truth of it has been uncovered,
Which
essentially.
which is also why it doesn't become an agreement usually, because an agreement requires that we be responsible.
Yeah, so it usually just remains an expectation.
Yeah, an unspoken expectation, of course. So you can hold it on someone.
Yeah, and so we can have that second dish of righteous
Righteous
indignation.
indignation. We can have our dessert also.
Have your cake and eat it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You're going down a line of thinking there.
No, that was the end of it. That 1 + 1 = 3. Which is yeah, that's interesting because actually I think, yeah, that's so funny because I actually think when I make agreements, they are they're usually from a very deep place.
Hmm.
So it is like for me, it's like a
So it's
sacred arrangement.
yeah, which is interesting, right? Because that's the way that you've set it up for yourself,
Right.
and I have it a little bit different, which is again really cool for people um, to see that difference because you know it's real life, folks.
Hmm.
um, so, but going back to just the trust part, um, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more because one of the things you brought up, uh, which you said you learned from me, but I just want to hear your your side of it, which was trust is. I guess we've been speaking to this the whole time, right? But trust as an illusion, right? Trust as it's kind of a cover for right. It's this, and you actually spoke to it. What was it that you said? Which was really cool the way you put it. It's a way of something about victim being. It's like it's almost like a shield or this thing we get to. It's a way we get to hold on to our victimization
Yeah.
because trust is, and so it's not. We think trust. We've built it up in our society, in our culture, as this. It's this thing, this really important thing, this end all be all, um, that is necessary for a wonderful relationship. Now, it's going to depend on how you hold trust in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Is it coming from a place of love? Is it coming from a place of fear? That's going to depend a lot on it. So it's going to largely be linguistic, but for most people, most of the time, trust is a victim mentality. And it's a all that means is it's a misunderstanding of self.
Yeah. It's a misidentification
It's yeah,
of what you
absolutely.
are. Yeah.
Right. It's a misunderstanding, misidentification of who we are. We don't need to trust in other people to be a certain way for for anything other than logistics. Right? So, here's the way I hold trust now, and it's kind of an evolving thing, right? But for me, and of course I still come from the victim, like I'm still a human being, right? I still have all the stuff we already talked about. But as it evolves for me, as my understanding deepens, trust looks more and more like I trust people to be people. I trust you to have access to the mind of God or peace and love at the highest level. And I also trust you to have an ego mind. And at its worst, our ego mind is pretty shitty. And it does some pretty shitty things to other people oftentimes, right? Out of insecurity, fear, anger, upset. But it would be silly of me, not wrong or sinful or anything like that. It would just be silly to trust someone to not have both of those things. And I think that's what we're looking for. I trust you to only come from the love of God, right? None of the ego stuff, except the special love. But we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, I think listening to you talk reminds me of, geez, it was a long time ago. 10 years ago, or this six, someone asked me something about, it was something to do with work, because I was unsure of what my next work was going to be.
Mm.
And I remember saying to them, no, the universe has always got my back, you know? And I might have even used the word trust in that sense. I just
Mm.
trust in the universe, or you would probably say I trust in God. Um, and I think, that is the way that I use trust. Because I don't use trust. Oh, I do use trust sometimes in the way we have been talking about it.
Right.
Um, but usually it's in that sense, in the sense, which isn't the same kind of trust we've been talking about. It's actually, if I go in a little bit deeper into it, it's actually more of a surrender over to something greater, like something greater's got me, something
Mm.
greater has me.
No,
So it's, you're picking up what I'm laying down. Yeah.
no, I really love the direction you just took that because I guess I was on to the coattails of it with the last bit about trusting other people to be who they are
Mm.
essentially, but with ourselves too. The word you started saying that the word that came immediately to mind was faith.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's actually another word that would probably maybe better explain what it is. There's that faith.
Yeah, yeah. So that
Yeah.
immediately popped into my head. And I was like, oh, he's talking about faith. And now that can be a bit of a dirty word for some people, especially in the sort of self-help. I trust in myself, not a higher power. um,
Right.
but faith is um, it is a beautiful thing, right? It's a different trust, right? It's
Hmm.
as a student of A Course in Miracles, it would actually one of the words it uses in that text um, is a knowing. So it's it's a we kind of talked about it coming the usages of trust, or in this case faith, can either really come from those two places of love and fear, right?
Hmm.
And if what's behind it is love, and we point it inward, what we're going to find is we are we are hooked up, we're cared for, loved by if you're not particularly religious or spiritual, you could call it your higher self. um, you could call it God, you could call it spirit, you could call it mind.
You don't have to call it
You
anything.
don't have to call it anything.
Like just the way you said it, we are loved. You just
Yeah,
feel into that, and it is, we could, it could be, we could use the word trust, we could use the word surrender, we could use the word faith.
yeah,
They're different flavors of kind of the same thing in
right,
the way that we're using trust in this part of the conversation.
right, absolutely. And that is um, that's a usage of that trust that's not born of victimhood, right? It's not born
Right.
of um, righteous indignation. But there's something, if we walk the earth with a trust or a faith or a knowing that it could just be that thing I was talking about in the beginning about this kind of an innate peace, or this thing that is at the core of who we are that most of us are very out of touch with, and largely have amnesia about. Um, but it makes all of the difference in the world. In fact, it's funny. You and I were talking about doing a show called "The Difference That Makes the Difference," and we might
Mm.
still we might still have to do that. But in my mind, the difference that makes the difference for us human beings is not a belief in a higher power, but I like the word faith, a faith, an experience, a knowing.
Yeah, I like knowing in the way that you're talking about this because it is. Well, see, here's language, right? For me, faith can be a little heady, whereas
Yeah, yeah.
knowing, which can be heady for other people, for me, the word knowing is almost like you know it, like your body, everything just knows it
Mm,
to be so.
yeah, yeah. It's just it's and it's protect. One of the ways I talk about sometimes, or one of the manifestations of it is wisdom, right? Is just um, a sense of being taken care of. That's why not necessarily worldly,
Hmm.
um, physical form, right? That gets confused a lot. I think like, oh, I'm going to be taken care of means I'm going to win the lottery, or I'm going to, you know, my cancer is going to be healed, or it could be any number of things, right? Um, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but that doesn't mean that it's not wonderful, right? Because we can experience the beauty of who we are, the beauty of where we came from, where we've come from, our creator, um, in any moment, in the midst of any situation, right? And there's, those of you listening will almost certainly have an inkling for that knowing, right? Sometimes we talk about as the ring. What he's saying has the ring of truth. We don't know why. It sounds true. So somewhere in the recesses of our forgetfulness, something we've forgotten about ourselves that's true, that we have an invulnerable spirit, a boundless spirit made of love. Um, I don't, yeah, like you said, like we both said, I don't care if you call it God, I don't care if you call it spirit. Something is there in us. I've never met anyone where it didn't exist, and that includes people who've done some pretty awful things, right? And that largely just means they're, in particular, they're particularly out of touch with that part of themselves. But that's a conversation for another day, I think. So Harold, anything you want to add to that? I think that's kind of a. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about trust that we want to cover.
It feels like that feels good.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. So as always, we're going to leave you there. But as always, if you've enjoyed this conversation with Harold and myself, I know I have. Um,
Me as well.
but if you have out there in the webiverse, uh, then feel free to reach out to either Harold or myself or both. Him and I both do this kind of work professionally. So we work with people one-on-one, groups, businesses, um, to basically as a guide on a journey to self-discovery, right? Part of this conversation about trust is just discovering more about ourselves, and what we do with our own thinking, and then what's underneath that, that's sometimes awful, and If you go a little deeper, it's always beautiful. So if you want to take that journey with either of us on a deeper level, then you can reach me, Tyler Thurman, at www.coachtylerthurman. That's TYLERTHURMAN.blogspot.com. And you can find all my good contact information there. And Harold, how can people reach you?
Through my blog is one place, heartttohand.wordpress.com, or my Facebook page, The Awakening Heart.
All right, fantastic. So until next week, thank you for joining us wherever you may be in the world and with all the love in the world. We'll see you next time.